What do you think that is?
All the way. Take it off, give it a look again. You might need a blue one. Yes. There you go. There. Good the straps. Still goes tighter. Seems like a thing, doesn't it? Yours better? Okay. Turn your light on that way. We'll get someone to help you sometimes easier. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Your light on for me? It's alright. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now if your helmet falls off accidentally, I'm not going to kick you off the tool for that. Okay? I'll hear it hit the ground, just pick it up and put it back on straight away, and we'll continue on. It's when you start taking it off on purpose that we start to have to think to get you up to the surface to safety. Now this lift ride is going to take us 1.5 minutes. The lift will start with a jump, finish with a jump, be a bit noisy, totally normal for this lift. I'm going to have access to this control panel here, mate. You all ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, my group. Step as you come out of the lift, watch you step through the mine today.
A bit of a step down.
I'd like you to come over this way, come through the door single file, and make your way up to the ore truck just up ahead. See that big square thing there? 4 wheels, wait for me there. Everyone head up to the ore truck, that's their first stop on the ground on the tour. You're now standing 61 metres straight down from where you were before. At the moment you're standing in what we call a plat. Plat is a Cornish term, means open space. There's a little bit more space in this area, so we can load and unload things coming in the shaft behind me. The shaft here was the only way in or out of this mine when it was a working gold mine. Do you all remember the 2 cages up the top that I pointed out? They operate in the middle compartments here, the working compartments. As one cage goes up in one, the other one goes down in the other. So you can bring things underground while taking things out at the same time. Efficiency means profit. Mining is all about profit. Keep that in mind along the way on the tour today. The whole shaft in there is lined with timber. Timber's red gum, loves the wet conditions. If you keep this type of timber wet and damp, it won't rot down all the grain. The timber that you're looking at in there was put in there in 1941. It's still fine. Red button in the middle of a shaft here. If you press it, it rings a bell. On every level of the mine and up on the surface. Bells are how they communicated. It's sort of like Morse code for mining. Every level has its own code, every command has its own code. We still use the bells to this day because we still use the cages to this day. Anytime someone like me who works here on maintenance is accessing below level 3 in this mine, I go down in a cage. I use the bells to communicate with the driver up on the surface to tell him where I want to go, where I want to stop, and I want to come back up. All that sort of stuff. If you want to go below level 3 in this mine, but you don't want to go in a cage, go down this one over here. It's called the manway. Has everyone here seen a ladder before? Yeah, it's got ladders in there. All the way from the surface to level 17 in the old days. Now if you had to climb out from level 17 after 8 hours of work because the winder's broken down so the cages aren't operating, a fit miner is looking at 2.5 to 3 hours climb from 410 metres. Not fun, so it's always good to have a way out. So it's an emergency exit still to this day. Big pipe coming out of the top of the manway up here brings compressed air underground. That runs all of our equipment machinery. The smaller pipe above it coming out brings fresh water underground, mainly used for our machine drills. I'll show you some machine drills later on, and I'll give one a run for you. Now, last compartment is this one over here. This one's called the smoke box. Works like a big chimney. Let's get the bad air out, good air down here. Now if we were going to blow some rock apart with explosives on this level, it would create smoke and fumes that we don't want trapped underground. Before we blew anything apart, we come back to the plat and we take all the boards out from the front of the smoke box. Normally that would be fully sealed in here. We then go back, rig up our explosives, blow our rock apart. All the smoke and the fumes from those explosives will slowly get sucked back to here, into the smoke box, up out of the mine with the updraft like a chimney. While that happens, fresh air is drawn down the other three to replace it through natural convection. So as a way of getting the good air down here, and the bad air out. Now if you want to take photos and videos on this tour, you can do it whenever you like, but you must stay with the group at all times. There's 11 k's worth of tunnels in this mine, or workings as we call them, and we're accessing under half a k today. But don't go wandering, you might stay down here for longer than you want. Just find a spot we can see some light. Should be pretty easy. Have we got any trained geologists here with us today? I'll take that as a no. Okay, let's start easy. Quartz in this mine is good, everything else is bad. Any ideas why the quartz would be good?
Gold in it.
Gold, perfect answer. It's got gold in it, hopefully. And gold is what this mine makes profit on. So the quartz has profit in it for the company. Everything else, no gold, no chance of gold being in it. It's waste and it's junk and it's in our way. If you remember that today, quartz good, other rock bad, you'll be fine. Because the gold is in the quartz. That's where the profit is. That's the very, very, very simple version of geology. I'm going to go into more technical detail than that because they pay me to. So here we go. Have a look around you. What you're looking at is the waste. This is the stuff without gold. In mining we call it mullock. Really what you're looking at here is either sandstone or slate. Most of the waste rock you're going to see today is going to be sandstone. That's going to cover over 90% of the waste you're going to see on this tour. It's 8 times harder than concrete around this area. It's a very hard rock. You also might see some slate. There's a line of slate running through there. You can often just break bits out with your fingers and hands and snap them. So big difference between strength between those two. Slate's going to cover probably about 6% of the waste rock you're going to see on this tour today. They're the two main ones. Both of them are sedimentary rocks. What that means are formed at the bottom of an ocean. These ones were formed between 480 to 500 million years ago. So it's very old rock. It's formed from the sand, the sediment, the dirt, getting washed off the land mass into the ocean. Everything settles to the ocean floor and gets cemented in place in different layers over millions of years worth of pressure pushing down on it. They date the rock to that time period because of the fossils they find in it. If we jump forward a bit to about 440 million years ago, lots of pressure coming in from the east and the west, all down the east coast of Australia. Has everyone here heard about the continental drift? Continental shelves, drifting and moving. When those shelves crash into each other, the rocks go up. That's how mountains are created, hills, ranges. The Great Dividing Range runs all the way down the east coast of Australia and curls up in Victoria. That started to be created around 440 million years ago when the shelf with New Zealand crashed into the shelf of Australia and the rocks started going up. Bendigo is part of the Great Dividing Range, so the same sort of thing happening here. Pressure coming in from the east and the west forced our sandstone and slate to start rising up, buckling and folding up into a saddle formation. Sandstone and slate has different strength, so it bends, buckles and breaks at different rates of force. As it's buckling up into that saddle shape, the rocks broke right in the centre. But more importantly for what we're talking about today, gaps and cracks occur between the two different layers of sedimentary rock in our saddle shape, one on top of the other, all the way down. One final jump between 440 and 350 million years ago. Superheated solutions of silica are forced from deep within the earth up through the gaps and the cracks caused by the buckling and folding and fills them all up. Super hot, under immense amounts of pressure, so hot that it melts things down, brings minerals up with it from deep within the earth, brings up gold, fool's gold, copper, sulfur, arsenic, silver. Eventually, that hot solution of silica will cool down, it will solidify within the gaps and the cracks, and it turns into a quartz reef. All quartz reefs around the world are formed the same way, the method that I just tried to explain to you then. All the gold that humans have ever touched started deep, deep within the earth and has been brought up. We know that for a fact. Where did the gold start before it got into the earth? That's up for debate. There are theories about it. There are commonly accepted theories these days like the supernova theory, and there are theories most people laugh at like the aliens theory. I personally like the aliens theory because it's fun. But they're theories, they're ideas. We don't know where the gold started before it was in the earth. The smartest geologists and scientists in the world don't know, but they've got some ideas about it. If you want to talk about ideas, talk to Google after the tour. Google's really good with ideas, but not so much. So, all of Australia's gold's associated with quartz. All of it's come up, but there are a few exceptions as to how the gold can come up around the world. Volcanic activity can bring gold to the surface. There's a mine in Papua New Guinea. They're mining in an active volcano for gold. Another option is marble. There's an area in the world where marble occurs naturally with gold inside it. The marbles come up liquefied from deep within. So all the world's gold has come up from deep below us. Where it was before that, we're not going to go into that too much. Okay? Bendigo is a little bit special because of our reef structure. All of our quartz reefs are in that saddle shape, one on top of the other on each line of reef. 37 lines of reef running north-south in Bendigo, parallel to each other, slowly rising and falling, 300 metres on average in between each line of reef. Every single line of reef in Bendigo, saddle reef, one on top of the other, all the way down to more than 5 k's deep, they say. 25 to 30 metres of waste rock in between each saddle reef on the way down on the line of reef. That's why every level of this mine is 25 to 30 metres apart. Every level is ideally testing a different reef to see how much gold is in it, so we can make a profit off it. It needed 10 grams of gold per tonne of quartz in the 1950s to make any dollars off it at all. Anything below that mark they leave, anything above that mark they mine out and make profit. So, gold mines like this in Bendigo don't run out of gold because they don't run out of quartz reefs. That's a really rare reef structure that we've got here. You can get saddle reefs in other gold fields around Australia and Victoria, but not predictable like they are here, one on top of the other. The other most famous gold field for that, apart from Bendigo, is in Nova Scotia in Canada. So, really rare reef structure. Quartz reefs here are predictable as to where they're going to be, easy to find. So that's the main reason why Bendigo has produced more gold than any place in Australia. So reefs are easy to find. Find the line, go down. Just remember, quartz good, other rock bad. There you go. There's some geology. Take from it what you want. Any questions? No. Okay. You're making it easy for me. Great. Let's go. You don't ask me, you won't find out. Get inside. Have a seat. There's benches on the sides and on the end there for you. Should fit most of you in there, I think. Interstate. Your name is blacklisted. So there are harsh punishments to miners who tried to steal gold and got caught. But this mine paid you very well to be a contract miner in this mine, doing the jobs that I'll tell you about today. This mine only employed professional, experienced miners. Most of the miners here had 10 years mining experience and were in their 30s. They always worked in a crew of 2. And a crew of miners was paid fortnightly as to how much work they got done. They got paid by the distance they went through the waste rock in 2 weeks. If they're at the quartz reef though, they're paid by how many tonnes of quartz they get out of the mine, how many ore trucks they fill up and push out of here. That's where most of their money was made. A good contract miner in this mine was earning £22 to £24 a week on average in 1952. And if you transfer that over to Australian dollars value these days, you'd be looking at $3,500 to $4,000 a week. It's pretty good money. $200,000 a year sound good? Miners here were paid for their expertise. They were getting paid 4 to 5 times the minimum average wage for a miner of those days. Paying experienced professional miners means less deaths, less accidents, so that was good for everyone. Paying them as to how much work they got done. Encouraging them to get more work done. More quartz comes out here, more money the miner's taking home, but also the more profit the mine makes. More quartz comes out, more gold comes out, more money for the company. Paying them really well discourages the miners from stealing gold in the first place. So it worked for both parties. That should give you an idea about how much you would be earning in this mine in 1952 doing the jobs that I'll tell you about today as a contract miner. You always need a light source underground. In this mine you'll be using one of these. This is a carbide lamp or a gas lamp. This compartment here would be filled up with fresh water. It's ready to go. This one here, unscrew the canister and fill it up with calcium carbide. A mix of limestone and coking coal that's been through a chemical process. It's a man-made substance. There's a tiny little hole just below my finger there. I'm going to put this one in the other one. Water will drip through the hole, mix with the calcium carbide, a chemical reaction forms acetylene gas. Gas comes up and out the end, spark up a match and light it up. It'll burn 15 times brighter than a candle, so it's a good light source. Tells you about air quality. Flame needs oxygen to burn, we need oxygen to breathe. Also really handy to light your fuses on your explosives at the end of a shift. If you were working here in the old days, you would be blowing a rock apart with explosives every single day you're at work. Because if you didn't, you weren't getting paid for the day. Because you're not moving forward and you've got nothing to take out. I'll talk to you about blowing stuff up a little bit later on in the tour and go all the way through it with you. Put your water down here, they're going to die of arsenic poisoning. So anything that comes down here, well, not us, But any animal that came down here, there's no animals down here at all. No bugs, no spiders, no snakes, no nothing. Because there's nothing for them to eat, there's nothing for them to drink that won't kill them. Okay? We stopped here to talk about rock support. Have a look above you and around you. You'll notice the timbering. This is pretty typical of what the miners used to put up in the old days. A bit of extra safety. And most people look at this timbering and they think it's there to hold the rock up, but it's not. It's there as an early warning system. If the rock starts to move and puts a lot of pressure on the timber, all of it's going to start to make a lot of noise, start to stress, start to creak, start to groan. We heard that as miners, we run. We get out of here as quick as possible because you don't want this to come down on your head with who knows how much rock above it. It'll kill you. Okay? It's an early warning system for the miners in the old days. It's not used to hold the rock up indefinitely. Any of this stuff that you see on the way through the tour is just there for display these days. You don't have to worry about listening for creaking and groaning today. We use split sets. Have you all seen those square things on the walls and on the roof with the mesh? There's one just behind you here, mate. They're called split sets. They're a modern form of rock support. Each one of those, if it's in good condition, is holding in 5 to 7 tonnes of rock in place for us. It's a much better way of doing it than just getting an early warning system to tell you to run. So the round bit in the middle of a square is a split set pin. The pin is about 6 foot deep into the rock, made of spring steel, big split down one side. All along that 6 foot of length, that pin's trying to spring out. Tightens all the rock up and holds all the rock in place. If we didn't have them here, you wouldn't be taking a tour here with me today. WorkSafe would have come through this mine and shut it down for tourism if that was the case. Alright, how are we going up the back there? Can you all see the window? Yep. I don't think you can right up the back, so keep shuffling around until you've got a good view or you're not going to see no gold. Alright, that looks a bit better. So what you're looking at here is a small section of a saddle reef. This is only a tiny bit of a reef here. Saddle reefs start thin on the legs at the sides, and as they curl over into that saddle shape, into the anticlinal fold, they tend to get bigger and bigger and bigger and thicker and thicker and thicker. Now the peak of the reef is called the cap of the reef. That's what you're looking at right now, the cap of a saddle reef. Below the cap, in centre country as we call it, is normally the biggest, thickest area of quartz on a saddle reef. Those areas can get up to 15 metre wide by 15 metre high bodies of quartz. There's a lot of quartz beneath your feet that you can't see right now in relation to this reef, but it's there. This doesn't just stop here, it keeps going, rising and falling. Remember when we were talking about geology before? You were standing above this reef at that stage. It's risen up as we've headed south. I have no doubt that you'll all be able to see gold in there if you have a close look and look in the quartz. There's at least 20,000 bucks worth of gold in these 3 windows. Easy. Okay? This is a payable reef. The miners had found this in the old days, they would have mined it out. There's too much visible gold in there for it not to be payable. The reason it's still here is because they never found it. They stopped 10 metres short of this reef in 1944. They found a rich reef lower in the mine. All the focus of this company went onto that payable rich reef. This level was then abandoned. They didn't have confirmation that this was going to be payable. But if they had to work for another 5 days on this level, they would have cut into what you're seeing here and they would have committed to coming and mining it out at some stage. There's just too much gold in this, visibly, for them to leave it behind. Now, we've got the gold on the face here, but think about what's further in. Think about what's further down into that main body. We've got this much gold here, it's going to be a similar amount further in. It doesn't just go from this to nothing. It's the same thing going down into that main body as well. There's much more gold to this reef than what you're just seeing behind these windows. If you're looking at that reef, you might see a lot of colour in the quartz. Yellows, greys, reds, browns. The more colour you've got in the quartz, the more mineralisation, the more chance of gold being in the quartz. We've got pure white quartz. We call it graveyard or tombstone. The only good thing you can do with it is decorate a grave or make a tombstone out of it. It does not have any gold in it. You want the colour. Okay? Colour means mineralisation, more chance of gold. You'll also see some stuff marked in those windows as iron pyrites. Most of you would probably know that as fool's gold. All fool's gold, all pyrites. It's cubic in structure, shaped like a square cube, and it's crystallised. It's crystal, so it reflects the light back at you. If you shine your light on anything and it glitters and sparkles at you, it is not gold. It is fool's gold. But having a lot of fool's gold or pyrites in your reef is a nice indicator. It should mean there's a lot of gold in there as well. So this reef has a lot of both. It sticks to the program. This mine produced 928.8 kilos of gold over 15 years of operation. If you sold that today with the gold price as it is, you'd be 75 to 80 million bucks richer. This mine ran at a profit for 15 years. This mine closed down in December of 1954. Obviously, not because it ran out of gold. We've already talked about that. Mines like this do not run out of gold because we don't run out of reefs. This mine closed down because they could no longer make money from mining the gold. It's all about profit, okay? So after the Second World War, the Australian government, as well as most governments around the world, shifted the price of gold to the gold standard, which meant the gold price was stuck down low and fixed in place, wasn't moving, just stuck there. The costs for running the mine go up and up and up and up and up, and it just becomes untenable. They can't make money out of it anymore. They're not in the business of losing money, so they shut it down and walk away. They left the buildings, equipment, machinery in place. Really rare for a mine like this to close down like that and leave everything there. Normally they would sell everything off to scrap or to other mines to keep using, get some money back into the company and clear their debts. But it wasn't the case with this mine. This mine was then abandoned for 15 years. It came up for sale in the early 1970s. Bendigo Council realised that this was the last complete mine with its buildings and equipment, machinery left out of over 5,600 in the Bendigo area. So they decided to buy it for $6,000 with the idea of preserving our mining history, but also with the eventual plan of turning into the tourist mine that it is today. They first took tours to this level, looking at this reef, in 1986. They were the first underground tours to happen here. Here we are in 2022 looking at the same reef with the same gold. We're really lucky to have this mine. It's the only one you can go in safely and have a look around out of 5,600 in Bendigo. It's safe because we maintain it, because we keep it safe for you to be able to access it. Okay, so we get a lot of people who come into this mine who think it was dug out with a pickaxe. No, it wasn't. If anyone tells you these kind of mines were dug out with a pickaxe and a shovel, they're lying to you or they don't know what they're talking about. All of these mines were blown out with explosives from the 1850s onwards. Once you're in this bedrock, remember I said sandstone, 8 times harder than concrete, you hit this rock with a pickaxe, your pickaxe will break before the sandstone does. So, early days, they did drill the holes into the rock by hand to pack full of explosives. They'd use a hammer and tap method. Can you all see the sledgehammer and chisel there? Think about double the size and weight of that sledgehammer, think about double the length of that chisel. One man holds a chisel on the rock face and turns it between every quarter turn. The other man hits it as hard as he can with a 12-pound sledgehammer. Using that method, you can drill a hole with 2 men a metre deep in 4 hours. That's what they started with in the 1850s and early 1860s. Up until 1867, when they start to mechanise with drills like this one on my right-hand side here. This one's technical name is a stroker or a reciprocator. This one in particular was built in Bendigo in 1884. So it's a local drill. Built about 4 blocks away from here. It's run off compressed air. A lot of people call these hammer drills because they just bash a hole through the rock. Now it will drill a hole for you a metre deep in 40 minutes, this one. So much quicker, much more efficient. The problem with it is it creates a lot of dust. Drilling through the rock quicker creates more dust. They're not controlling the dust it creates. Now if you drill through quartz, it creates silica dust. If you breathe silica dust into your lungs, you end up with silicosis and you cough yourself to death from silicosis. Silicosis is still a death sentence to this day. If you get it, you're going to die from it. But the miners who are working down here, exposed consistently throughout their working life, not unusual for a family to send their young son off to work at 11 or 12 years old in the 1870s to work in the mines if they needed the money. And if he's consistently exposed to that dust, he'd be lucky to live to 35 and cough himself to death from silicosis. The biggest killer of miners in the late 19th and early 20th century was silicosis. No one knows how many miners died from it, but it was a massive number. That's why most people these days would call that drill a widow maker. It literally creates widows. So these drills operated from 1867 all the way into the early 20th century. And then these ones started to come out. This one's a drifter. This is the kind of drill they used in this mine when it was a working gold mine. At one stage, this mine had 10 of these working in this mine per shift. Now, this one was made in 1914 in Cornwall, so this is a pretty early model drifter, but it's a much better drill, much quicker drill, much better for the miners as well. It's still run off compressed air, but it's not a hammer drill. It doesn't bash that hole through the rock. This one, we turn it on with the trigger here. The drill steel turns mechanically by itself. With that one, we have to have the drill steel turned by hand. And you slowly wind it in on the handle, on the screw at the back. Now, it's also got this connection here for fresh water, which is one of the main differences. Remember, we're bringing the compressed air, running it, and the water down in the pipes from the surface. Run the water through the drill, through the hollow drill still into the hole we're drilling, as we're drilling it. That has many benefits, makes the drill work quicker. 1.5 metres deep in 10 minutes, 2 metres deep in 15 with this one. So much more efficient. Efficiency means profit for the company. But also good for the miner's health. That water into the hole mixes up with the dust as it's created, controls the dust on the ground in a muddy paste so it's not floating, we're not going to breathe it in, we're not going to get silicosis with this machine. Best way I can show you how it works is to turn it on. And once they have 10 of these working in this mine per shift, you wouldn't just be next to one of these. If you're on a payable reef, you might be next to 5 in a row in an enclosed area. Now it is going to be noisy, it's going to be over 100 decibels. So, little miners, can you block your ears? Put your fingers in your ears, little miners. Big miners, I'm going to suggest that you probably want to do the same thing, but we do get a lot of people who want to video this operating. If you're an adult, that's fine, you can make a decision for yourself. But don't complain to me about your sore ears if you decide to do that. This is everyone's warning. Are we all ready?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. You would be using that drill for a good 2 hours a shift, 6 days a week, and you might be next to 5 in a row on a big stope on the same level. So times that noise by 5 for 2 hours. I wasn't drilling rock then. If it was drilling rock, it would be noisier. We're not running at proper compression. So most miners had industrial deafness. They couldn't hear much. You're holding on to this for 2 hours a shift, 6 days a week, and the vibrations will come up through your hands and your fingers, kill the nerves off in there, and you end up with white knuckle. Your hands end up like that. Can't feel anything in your hands, but you still can use them. There are health issues with this drill for the miners. It's not as bad as dying from silicosis at 33 years old. Silicosis, you literally start coughing up dead lung tissue. It's a horrible way to die. 3 blast patterns on the wall in front of you here. Each one of these will blast out 1.5 metres to 2 metres squared of rock. That's going to throw out 15 to 20 tonne of material for you every time. As a general rule in this mine, they blast it out 1.5 metres squared each shift. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 of these blast patterns out of the 3, because 2 of them are what they use to blow the rock out where you've been walking today. Now, some of the stuff that you've been walking through with me today is original, blasted out in the 1940s, and that was blasted out with a Bendigo drag, the one over in the corner over there. You also have walked through areas that were blasted out in the mid-1980s, when we talked a little bit about it before, when they were redeveloping this level for tourism. That stuff was blasted out with a burn. Okay? Both of these work the same, it's just the burn's a more modern, refined version of the drag. So, if you look at the burn, can you all see that big hole in the centre? That's the central post hole. Now, if we're going to blast out 1.5 metres squared with this, that hole, as big as you can see on the outside here, goes straight in 1.5 metres deep. That's where a rock is going to get blasted to. The explosions on the burn would happen when the lights come on. 2 holes go off at once every half second, moving away from the weakness point in the middle and blowing the rock in towards it. Finally, down the bottom, we've got lifters. Lifters pick up all the broken rock and throw it out in a nice pile ready to get removed. Anyone got any ideas as to where the rock would go if we blew those explosives where those lights came on without the hole in the middle? No, it's got to go somewhere.
Come back at you.
You're on the right track, it's going to come out. To blow this out and drill the holes, you've got to have some access point, don't you? So if we were in a cross-cut or drive like this, and we're right at the end here, and we drill our pattern, we blow it out, and we don't have that hole in the middle, all the rock comes straight down here. Does that sound like that's safe? No, we're not controlling it. Do you really want pieces of rock bigger than the size of your head blasting 100 metres straight down your tunnel? I don't know, maybe you do. I don't know, I don't, because it's dangerous and it's going to blow out, knock out all your timber supports in those days, and it's going to cause havoc with your mine. And if you're close enough to it, it'll come through you. So we're giving it somewhere to go within the area that we're blasting out. Does that make sense? We're controlling where the rock's going to get blasted to. Look, if you worked here in the old days, you worked in a crew of 2 at all times. The crew's going to have 3 big jobs to get done for the day. Your first job is going to be to remove 15 to 20 tonne of rock. And a good crew will get that done in about 4 hours. Your next big job is going to be to drill your holes with that drill I ran for you before. You'll be drilling the pattern in the corner over there, the Bendigo drag. 15 holes to drill usually, but maybe up to 20, depends on rock strength and structure. So 10 minutes a hole with a drifter, 1.5 metres deep. So you're looking at over 2 hours on the drill per shift per crew. That's your second job, drill your holes. And your last job of the day is to rig it up with explosives and blow it apart. So there are 3 main jobs for a crew of professional miners working here in the 1950s. Move the rocks, drill the holes, blow the rock apart. So we're going to rig this up with explosives. Now, let's start in the early days, 1850s, early 1860s. You all heard of gunpowder?
Yeah.
They used gunpowder to blow the rock up in those days. Hard to control. Lots of accidents, lots of deaths. It's what they had, it's what they used. 1867 comes along. Alfred Nobel's been mixing things in with straight nitroglycerin to try and give it some stability. Has some success and invents dynamite in 1867. Has everyone heard of dynamite?
Yes.
Much better option than gunpowder and black powder, but dynamite still had a tendency to go off in your hand if you shook it too much. If you drop a stick of dynamite on the floor, it will explode at your feet and blow you up. You had to be very careful with it. But it was a better option than gunpowder, more powerful, more controlled, so everyone started using dynamite. Alfred's not happy with the stability of dynamite. Still, people are dying using it. So he keeps working on it, has some more success, fixes up the stability issues with dynamite and gives it more power. In 1875, Alfred Nobel invented gelignite. Has everyone here heard of gelignite before? Some of you have, some of you haven't. Well, now you have. Now, everyone said they'd heard of dynamite, hadn't they? Didn't they?
Yeah.
Most of you people who are thinking about dynamite are actually thinking about gelignite. Okay? It's the safer, stronger version of dynamite. Goes off with a lot more power, doesn't go off until we give it an explosive kick that it needs to go. So it's not going to go off in your hand if we shake it too much. They were still using it here in the 1930s, 40s and 50s. It was invented by Alfred Nobel in 1875. So, we've got to rig these holes up with gelignite. And this should answer your question from before, sir. So, first thing we need to do is we need to put 3 sticks of gelignite into the hole. We do that by hand. We pick them up and we put them in the hole. Just like that. Easy. Once we've got those 3 in there, we need to put 1 more in there. It's called the primer. So you need 3 things for a primer. You need a stick of gelignite about that long. You need a 2 metre long safety fuse. You'll see the old movies where they've got the fuse and it burns through. It's got gunpowder inside the fuse. Wrapped really tightly with either string or cloth. It's a safety fuse. You need a 2 metre long one of those, and we need a detonator about that big. Has everyone here shot a cat gun before? Yep. Alright, so if anyone shot a cat gun, it's like a cat from a cat gun, but much more powerful. The detonator's got gunpowder inside it. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do with our primer is we get our safety fuse and our detonator, and we put the detonator on the end of the safety fuse and we crimp it in place with a pair of tongs. Once we've done that, we need to make a hole in the end of a gelignite stick. Gelignite's like a hard, stiff putty, so it's not too hard to get a sharpened piece of wood or dowel and make a hole in the end of it. Once we've done that, we grab the end of our 2 metre long safety fuse with the detonator attached, put it into the hole in the gelignite stick and tighten up the gelignite around it with the forefinger. That's what we call a primer, and then, by hand, we put the primer in the hole. And once we've done that, we get a long tamping stick made of wood, and we just pack them all into the end of the hole nice and snug. We hang our safety fuse out of the hole. Once we've got one hole done, we do the next one. Once we've got them all done, normally 15 to do, we trim the fuses to different lengths to achieve the sequence that we want in the blast pattern. Trim an inch off the end of that 2 metre long safety fuse will alter the blast by half a second. You want 2 holes going off every half second with the burn, and you want the lines of holes going off every half second with the drag over there. So they work the same way, it's just the burn is a more modern, refined version of the drag. Once you've done that, you grab all your fuses together, you light them up at the same time with that gas lamp I showed you in the crib room before. You put those fuses on the ground and you walk away. You've got 5 minutes to get to safety with those fuses being 2 metres long. If you need longer than that, just make your fuses longer. It's an easy fix. You don't want to run away from this stuff. If you run face first into a rock wall, you're going to knock yourself out. If you're too close, you're going to get seriously injured, or if you're really close, you're going to die. So just leave enough time to calmly retreat to safety. In this mine, you're required to go to the plat. You need to give a warning with the bells to everyone else in the mine that you're blasting and what level you're blasting on. And then you wait at the plat, underground. You've got to count these going off, make sure they go off according to plan. I'm not going to blow you up today. Watch the burn cut. 3, 2, 1. You'd have to count them as they went off. You wouldn't be listening for them though. I told you before, most of the miners were deaf. You were feeling percussion hits coming through you with the plat. All the miners who worked here were professionals. They knew how to tell the difference between a misfire and everything going off according to plan by the strength of the hits coming through. If they went off according to plan, finish your shift, go to the surface, get strip search checked, walk over the road to the National Hotel, barman over there felt the vibrations from 10 crews blasting at the same time coming up, you already had beers poured out on the bar for the miners. If they didn't all go off, you've had misfires, and misfires happen sometimes, it's not uncommon. Same thing applies, still going to the pub. Before you go to the pub, you tell the boss that you've had misfires. He informs the next crew of miners coming down here there's live explosives in the pile of rock, they have to move. If they hit a detonator on a primer with a shovel, that's it. Everything's going off, it's a chain reaction. If you're within a shovel length of 4 sticks of jelly going off, it's not going to end well for you. But remember, all the miners who work here are professional, experienced miners dealing with misfires as part of their job. They all know how to deal with them. No one died from hitting the dead in this mine. There you go. There's blasting. Any questions? 1.5 squares, so they blasted out 15 tonne of rock. And that was on the afternoon shift, so yesterday, and we've started on the morning shift. And we've got this big pile of rock in front of us. Now the only time that you were going to use a pickaxe like this is a Cornish pickaxe. You've got a big pile of rock. If it's been left for 8 hours in these damp conditions, it's going to solidify a fair bit. So you would use this as a rake down that pile to loosen it up so you can start to use your shovel. That's the only reason that you are ever going to use a pickaxe in this mine. No diamond head pickaxes down in Minecraft. Okay? So, 15 tonne, 2/10 of that 15 tonne is going to be bigger pieces, no bigger than the size of your head. Pick them up with your hands, throw them into the ore truck. The other 8/10 of that 15 tonne is going to be small, fine stuff. Scrape it up with a shovel. Get it into the ore truck. Ore truck will hold 1/2 tonne of 500 kilos. 2 miners, good contract miners, moving the rock with those methods will get that filled up in 10 minutes. They might have 30 to do if they've got 15 tonne. They were on a working level with a payable reef, lots of crews down there. Highly likely that the boss is just going to send unskilled labour to push the trucks, but the miners are still going to have to load them. Exploratory level like this, it's highly likely that the miners are going to have to push their own trucks. Now, if they've blasted out 2 metres squared on the previous shift, you're going to have 40 of them to do because you've got 20 tonnes. But a good crew will get the rock out of here in around 4 hours. Over 100,000 tonne of material was removed from this mine by hand. There's nothing else apart from manpower to push those down here. So it was all loaded up and pushed out by hand. 15 years, 11 k's worth of tunnels, over 100,000 tonne of material came out of this mine by hand. That's how they did it. Some mines, bad enough money to get a machine like this one. This one's a rocker shovel. These started coming out in 1938, running compressed air, big bucket at the front, controlled with 2 handles on the side. One handle controls going backwards and forwards on the rails, the other handle controls a big bucket at the front going all the way up and over and all the way down. 4 buckets up and over into the truck behind it, it's full, ready to get pushed out. Less than 1.5 minutes to fill up a truck with one of these. But they were very expensive, even into the 1940s and 50s. Too expensive for this mine. They didn't have the money for them, and the miners didn't want them. Because the miners here were paid on the contract, they got paid as how much work they got done. They thought that if they got these in here, they would put them on a lower base wage because they wouldn't be working as hard. And the miners here didn't want that. They wanted to work hard, they wanted to take home more money. So these were never used in this mine. Always did it by hand. Your machine miners now, you're ready to go to work next week. 3.5 to 4 grand a week, get to blow stuff up every day. If you're really sneaky, you can steal explosives and blow stuff up at home. Miners were known for doing that. Just blowing stuff up at home is fun.